All right, welcome back to the show, Shana James.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, great to see you.
Great to see you too.
Today we're going to dive into pleasure and power, and I'm so intrigued. I just want to say that.
I think there is some intrigue, right? In that combination of power and pleasure, and power can get a bad rap these days. I just want to start with that too, right?
Absolutely.
I'm not talking about, power over or power without consent or power in a way that's disrespectful. It's like really looking for, okay, how can power be collaborative and playful and connected and all of that?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. I think that's important to make that disclaimer there up front. Thanks for being sensitive there. Yeah. I think it does get a bad rap. Maybe we could start there just for a minute that, even as you're listener, you could think about what comes up for you when you hear the word power.
Yeah.
And then if you hear the words power and pleasure side by side, what comes up for you? Because that's pretty charged potentially for a lot of us.
It is. And somehow I'm just thinking of the word empowered, right? It's like when we are empowered, we find that place within ourselves of belief in ourselves or a kind of strength or, a clarity or a groundedness. And so I hadn't really thought of that until this moment, but I'm just thinking of how power and empowerment, it's really, it really is in a way about empowerment as opposed to power over.
Yeah. I'm with you. And when I think of pleasure and power in combination, I think of all the ways in which I've been disempowered there, right, in my life. And so pleasure can be so empowering, right?
Yeah.
So empowering.
Yeah.
And for a lot of us with the shame and whatever history we have, there can be maybe the synonym is more like pain, or the adjacent word is like pain rather than power or empowerment.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. You feel like you've had a lot of disempowerment around pleasure in your life?
Yeah, there's just places throughout my history where pleasure and power didn't feel that way, there's times where it has, certainly. Yeah. But there's times where it hasn't. And I'm just seeing if there's an invitation here for the listener to again, checking in are we, because I think you're going to help us with how do we get empowered in our pleasure? How do we feel powerful and access our pleasure simultaneously, perhaps?
Yeah,
so I'm
exactly.
Really curious about that.
Yeah. I think about for myself, pleasure is not necessarily my go-to, or if it was in my younger years, it has not been since I became a parent, Right. And there's a way that pleasure can feel frivolous and feel like, well, there's so much other shit that needs to get done. It's not important. I've got to prioritize other things, work and parenting and navigating life and bills and finances. And so I think there's a way that I recognize that I can get a little more dried out, at this phase of life. And so again, bringing back pleasure it's not been easy for me. It's been a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking about our kids before we hit record and how we're talking about vitality and how our kids are very vital. And I'm curious about your kid around pleasure. Like our kids seem to experience pleasure frequently and a lot.
Yeah, fully and frequently.
Anything, right?
Yeah.
Cooking in the kitchen, or something that spilled on the floor, or the cat's funny move that he just made. There's just so many pleasurable moments. And it's inspiring because, as I was saying to you, I can get so serious and head down, and pleasure's available to me too, but I'm not plugged in,
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And when I think about relationships and what happens when two people are head down, right? I can even imagine being in the kitchen, kind of head down, not even looking at, right?
Admin,
tunnel
logistics,
vision.
We're just deal mode.
Yeah. And then we look at each other and it's like, oh, you're just another part of that.
Right.
Whereas,
and we take the person for granted, and Yeah.
And often in the beginning of a relationship, it's like, oh, there's pleasure. Are you bringing me joy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Shana, what's an entry point when we start talking about how do we move toward more of that empowered pleasure or that pleasurable power?
Yeah. The first thing that comes up for me is one's own clarity, right? Like before you even connect with another person or relate with another person or be sexual with another person, it's like, do I actually know myself? Do I know what I like? Do I know what I want? Do I know what I don't like? All of those things. I find that when I'm working with my clients, we get raised with a lot of shoulds and a lot of expectations and a sense of, right, who I should be or what my sexual preferences should look like or sexual desire should look like. And so I think a big part of being empowered and feeling one's own power comes back to like making myself right for what I want, what I need, what I like, what I don't like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So orienting myself prior, I think it kind of reminds me of our last episode. I think it was episode 258. We talked about helping men kind of open up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we explored a little bit of this where it's like, how do I actually know myself, what I like and what I don't like before I come to the table, right?
Yep.
Good reminder.
Yeah. I was working with a man yesterday or the other day, and he was like, I don't know what I'm passionate about anymore. My wife wants me to have passions or to be excited about something. He was like, and I can't find anything. And we were talking, there were a couple different things we were talking about. One, I was saying like, he started talking about how at some point he had wanted to go travel or go, snorkeling or something. And I was like, okay, well, what happens? How do you feel, right? When you bring that to mind, when you think about snorkeling, when you imagine yourself in the water. And he was like, oh, that feels like relaxing and nice. And I start to feel excited. And, I'm like, okay, there. So I think sometimes when we think about pleasure or passion, it's almost like the fantasy is like, I got to be hit over the head and I've got to be like on fire about something and I've got to be super driven. And it can't just be like, oh, nice. And so we were talking about that and the difference also between just noticing in the moment. I find that in my own body, I'm curious about yours. There's like a little uplift of energy or a down tick and a drain, depending on if something is going to be, good for me or I like it or not. So if I go to the grocery store and I actually pick up something, I can feel in my body if it's like, oh, this is actually going to be good for me or this is not going to be good for me. Or, if I'm trying to decide, do I want to take a nap today, which never happens. I don't know why I just said that. Or, do I want to go for a walk? There's usually like an energetic shift in my body. Does that happen for you?
Yeah, I like that. No, I think it happens for my wife, but I'm a little different. And it's a slippery slope, I think, for me, where if I'm at the grocery store and I was doing that, I might look at things that actually aren't good for me and I might feel that.
And feel that pleasure.
Which is like a little dopamine because it's sugary or something.
Yeah.
And it actually isn't good for me.
Yep. I can totally imagine that.
I'm curious
too.
how you distinguish. Yeah, like what's good for your essence and your being versus what's instant gratification or something.
Yes. Right. And it might be that there's this combination of, okay, as we get to know ourselves and as we get to know what we want and also what is healthy for us. And, that could be nutrition wise, that could be, mental health, like all of the different kinds of health, right? Physical, mental, emotional. I'm just starting to think about the balance that comes in when we can use the wise mind or the clear mind instead of the monkey mind or the addicted mind. And then we can use the heart and we can use the body. And so, right. I'm imagining that if I actually slow down that moment of that uplift of energy for me, it actually has more components you're having me see than I realize. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's what I notice is, I think it's important to just talk about this because it's what happens to me. And we're, I think, talking a little bit about men, or we're going to talk about men in this pleasure power thing.
Yeah.
And men, I'm going to generalize here, and I'm including myself in this.
Yeah.
When we're disconnected from ourself and stressed,
yep,
we reach for pleasurable things as a way to get relief from the disconnection and how bad that feels, how depressing or anxious it feels. So I think it's important for the listener to know, again, what we're talking about. Like when I'm in myself, pleasure is going to feel really different than that kind of metaphorical candy that I'm reaching for to just get relief from my stress, for example.
Yep. Yeah, right. There's a huge difference. I love that you're pointing this out. There's a huge difference between like, I'm tense and I'm stressed, or I'm feeling some kind of pain or struggle, and what will relieve that?
Yeah.
Versus, oh, okay, I'm slowing down, I'm taking a breath, I'm pausing, and I'm really checking in to see like what would be good for me on all of these different levels.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not as intellectual. Like, I'm trying to figure out where to move right now, and there's so much of my intellect that's like, that place would be really good. And the rest of me is like, nope, actually it's this other place. So I can see, right, where there is confusion there. But I think that the point we're kind of circling around is getting to know yourself. And how do you know when you're in a place of stress and trying to just relieve something? Or how do you know when you're actually in that essence where there's clear wisdom coming in, right? And to be able to know yourself and the differences of when those are happening.
Yeah, and over the years, I've really tracked this in myself, and specifically around sex, masturbation, porn. There's when I'm disconnected from myself, there's a susceptibility, vulnerability to pleasure that is just giving me a quick dopamine hit. Yeah. And a release or relief.
Yep.
Right. And I think this is where men are objectifying women and mistreating women the most, is when they're disconnected, wanting a hit of something, right? That just is actually for really just about them. It's actually not about service or mutual collaboration, or it's just about how can I get a hit and how can I get release and relief.
Yep.
So obviously that's not what we're talking about, but I think that's really important to mention because, I think a lot of men are very vulnerable there, and men, because we are disconnected from ourselves from a young age and from our hearts and our relational capacities, we kind of lone wolf it, and we're now in this lone wolf disconnection place.
Totally.
And so we're very vulnerable to these outside forces of I call it medication, where I'm looking for things outside myself so that I can feel okay.
Yes. Right. And I think then this is, where we could go back to the empowerment, or that sense of internal power or strength, or that sense of, all right, from a place that I am okay, or I'm good and right, and I'm not trying to defend myself or prove myself or fix myself or any of those things. Right. And this can take some time to be able to get back there, to actually then know, what do I want?
Yeah.
Right. And where is that want coming from? Is it the want for chocolate cake for breakfast, right? The metaphorical chocolate cake, or porn, or whatever it may be. Or is it like, oh, I can see how this would serve my highest good, my family's highest good, my partner's highest good. There's something where I think the more we turn inward to get to know ourselves, those things start to get clarified. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so with you. And then I also can develop pathways into connection, right? Into self-connection, self-knowing. And it might be exercise. It might be relationship, connection, intimacy. It might be body work. It might be a walk in nature.
Yeah.
A lot of us have our different pathways.
Yeah. I love that. And I think about being with a partner, for those who are with a partner, or it could be, a friend, or this could be a future relationship, where bringing that knowing into conversation or dialogue. I think a lot of men especially think like, I have to I have to know if I'm going to want something, I have to know how to do it. And I have to know if she's going to like it. I have to know that it's going to go well. Right. And so I think there is, again, an empowered place of coming from like, oh, okay, we could have a conversation about this with me not having to know the answers or me not having to get it right. What's it like to open up kind of an inquiry or a dialogue in a couple around what would be good for you or what would be good for me? And this could be in the bedroom or out of the bedroom. I know I did a podcast recently with a man who was like, at the beginning of the year, I have my wife give me a list of what would make me feel like a great husband that year. I just thought that was so sweet, right? Mm-hmm. But that sense of we get to ask each other instead of thinking we already have to know. I think from a empowered place, again, we don't need to prove or defend that I'm good enough or I'm strong enough or I know everything. It's like, oh, I can actually ask these questions of my partner. And
nice. Yeah. And I love that your question specifically around, you're sort of helping us men with those ways in which we can box ourselves into, I should already be good at this. I got to get it right. Yeah. Because if I'm coming with that mindset, I'm already screwed at the table. I'm like, we're going to have a conversation, but it's going to be inhibited by my injuries and all my baggage around getting it right and being an expert and performing. Yeah. That's all getting in the way. And you're sort of inviting us here to, let's just set that aside for a minute while we have a conversation.
Which I acknowledge is hard. I mean, I watched my child who was born male, like just be so pissed about losing or about not being good at something. And I think we talked about this maybe the last time, like not wanting to try different sports or whatever, because it's like, I don't know how to do that. So I just recognize too, that it can be very ingrained in a lot of our psyches and often in the male psyche of like, right, I don't have value if I can't do this well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a sad truth about a lot of us men. Yeah. And we guys, if you're listening, that's something we got to work on. Is that an old narrative? It's just like, it's tiring and it's exhausting to live that way. Like that you're supposed to be good at everything all the time and know everything all the time. And
right. I mean, that's such a box. And such a box. Even I find, a lot of couples don't have those kind of meta conversations of, hey, well, what happens when one of us doesn't know how to do something? Or, it's rare for a man to come into a relationship and say like, I'm not going to do everything right, or I may not be who you want me to be, or for, either partner to say this and like, we're not going to live up. I remember in the beginning of this relationship I'm in, we were both like, well, we're not going to live up to each other's expectations and fantasies. Yeah. That's just clearly not going to happen at this age. So, maybe we should just get all the schluff out on the table and
how refreshing though.
Right. It was not an easy beginning of a relationship, but I think it really created a foundation for going beyond those fantasies of someone else is going to, fill some hole.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Shana, are there ways in which, let's just go into the gender binary for just a minute, just for the sake of the conversation. Yeah. Are women, in your experience, approaching this conversation around pleasure and power differently than men?
That's a great question. From what I've seen working with women, it can be really hard to experience pleasure. And, I've seen a lot of my men clients attempt to get their partners to have more pleasure. And yet the women are stressed and, we're in the middle of a pandemic and there are kids to take care of and there's life and there's health and there's safety things and all of this. And so, when I think about women and pleasure, I know I do this, so I'll speak for myself. Like I often, like I said before, let pleasure kind of fade into the background. Yeah. Yeah. So when I think about women and power and pleasure, it's like, again, going back to empowerment, can I allow myself to value pleasure or to make it an important part of my life so that I don't just dry out and, feel drained and then kind of feel like the world is against me.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'm curious how that impacts, let's say you're not that you have to speak for all women, of course, but if you're in that place as a woman, how might that then affect your partner, male partner?
Well, right. And like, I don't feel powerful when I'm in that place of feeling drained.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a kind of a little, I'm going to swear, like a mind fuck in there, right? Where it's like, I'll be powerful as long as I'm doing and accomplishing. And yet, right, how it affects the partner is kind of like we were talking about before, where both people are head down and serious and, trying to get things done, but then they're not really seeing each other anymore or feeling each other anymore.
Yeah.
I think this is a similar place where it's like, well, we got to do that and the dishes have to get done and this has to get done. And I think women especially, I love how Alison Armstrong talks about women being multi-focused and men being more unifocused, if we're going binary here.
Yeah.
And so like if a woman sees the dishes or the pillows or things disheveled and the house is, out of sorts, it can be like, I can't open to you. I can't be sensual. I can't cuddle. I can't like do this until things feel a little more sane and organized around me.
Yeah.
So, but as we can actually realize these things and even find a little bit of humor with them, then we can stay connected no matter what. Like, oh, I see that you need things to be a little more organized before you can feel a little more pleasure. Let me help you make that happen. As opposed to like, God damn, she always,
Yeah, the house is never
distracted.
Right. Never right for her. She's
never
so
right for her. Nothing's ever right for her. I'm never right for her. She's so controlling. That's in a place when we know that we've gotten away from, having a little more lightness and humor about the craziness of being a human. Cause
oh my God. Yeah. Especially in this time.
Yes. Especially in this time.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder to kind of zoom out into this meta conversation. A couple of times now you've done that, and I think that's extremely useful.
Yeah.
Like before we get into the minutia of what's happening, let's hold on. What are we actually? How are we orienting around this whole conversation, and how do we see the world here? And yeah, that's great. I'm also aware of a lot of, back to women for a minute, mothers. At least this is according to my partner.
Yeah.
Where some women will perceive that empowerment or being in their power is doing a lot of things, right? Work or crushing it in business or something. When in actuality, that could be true, but it could also be true that mothers, for example, when they're deep in their nurturing,
feel really powerful.
That's a very powerful place, right? Yeah. And I witnessed that with my wife. It's like incredibly powerful when she's in just her deep nurturing badassery. It's so inspiring because I don't have that. Mine's different.
Yeah.
And to watch her, it's so cool. But culture doesn't value that type of power, right?
No, it doesn't. And I love that you're bringing that up because, right, again, the word power can seem like it has one mode or, like it's going, it's doing, it's accomplishing. And the power of a mother's love or a father's love, right? The power of love.
Yeah. And the power of being.
And the power of being, right? Just being with each other. That's so much of the couples that I work with, or if one person comes to me and they're something's going on in the couple, but I'm not working with them both. It often gets down to, the ways that we're feeling disempowered. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with that person. And so then we can't just be together, right? There's there's a power that happen. I don't know. I'm might be talking myself in a loop here, but
I'm with you.
I think there's a power that happens when we are, when again, it comes from this, like making ourselves right. I was working with a guy today where, I had him say, like, I'm human. It's okay to make a mess. It's okay to make a mistake. We all do. And I'm still lovable.
Nice.
Right? I don't know. I've never really done that before, but it just came out. I was like, okay, repeat after me, you know? Yeah. Because from that place, there's a kind of power, a quiet power, or like a gentle power of, oh, now I'm not trying to do or prove or accomplish, which makes space for what you're talking about. We could actually be together and feel that love again and feel that connection and that spark.
Totally. Yeah. And I think currently that's more of my work, because this, with my own inner work, is the being, like being and being in power in a being state, because there's so many tapes. And there's also a lot of forward momentum in my life. So I'm like doing so much and accomplishing so much. And at the same time, the being can get left out. And some of that, sometimes I imagine, I'm just talking this out loud right now, that I wonder if it's because there's messages about being as not power, right?
Yeah.
Or not empowered. I know that, like, intellectually, I know that's not true, but I just wonder if I get into unconscious mode, if that's what's going on.
Yeah. I think it takes a lot for us to undo the stories around power equals accomplishment and power equals doing.
Yeah. Hey, every month I'm going to be doing a challenge. You've probably heard about it if you've been listening. You've got to be on my email list, however, to get in on the action. And you could win, a relationship course. You could win potentially coaching with me, no charge. You could win coaching with one of our coaches. There's lots of cool stuff that you can win if you play. How do you do that? All you have to do is be on my email list and look for the email that says personal update. In that email, I share a lot of personal wins and losses, highs and lows, podcasts I'm listening to, books I'm reading, favorite song, anything I'm watching, and what my challenges are, what my opportunities are, and of course, the challenge. So just go to relationshipschool.com/challenge, and you are going to be asked to just leave your email address. Okay, and then you're on my email list. Boom, done. And just make sure it doesn't go to spam. All right? relationshipschool.com/challenge. Will you remind me of the subtitle of your book? It's just so I can...
Yes, it's A Man's Guide to Becoming a More Confident and Satisfied Lover and Leader.
Yeah, nice. So let's hang out there for a minute, because I think that feels... A Man's Guide to Becoming a More Confident and
satisfied.
Nice.
Lover and leader.
Satisfied. Why does that matter? That feels really important.
Yeah, I wanted it to be not like a better lover or leader. I wanted it not to be you have something to work for. It's more like, I want you to feel good about yourself, and I want you to get to be to feel good in yourself, right? Like a lot of men I work with, there's a lot of attention on how do I make her feel good, or how do I get this right so she will be happy. And there's often a leaving oneself out of, if we're having sex, like I want to know what's going to feel good to me too. I'm not just trying to do or accomplish, right? There's a power in actually recognizing, this would feel good. And so I'm going to move this forward in this way, from a place of being connected to oneself as opposed to some idea of what this would look like if it was good.
This is where a lot of dudes get stuck, including me, right? It's this, manufactured idea of how I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And for me, David Deda's work actually perpetuated this a long time ago, where I got really caught in, okay, my job is to pleasure you so that you open to God and have this amazing multi-orgasmic experience.
Yes.
And it's all my responsibility.
Yes.
And it's also my responsibility to somehow handle your shitstorm of emotion.
Whew. Yeah.
And it's like, it's so much pressure, and guys are already so doing that to themselves anyway.
Yes.
I don't know how useful that is.
No. I've seen the same thing happen with many men. I think it happened with my ex-husband. It happened, with the data work. And I think there really is a seed of wisdom in there around opening to spirit and pleasure, all of that. But it gets interpreted, I think, through our lenses of power and accomplishment and
performance.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what you're suggesting here to me is an undoing of that. And not even just the new age sort of overlays or whatever messages we've got in Tantra, a workshop, or, because there's a lot of that too.
Yeah.
But it's just this life experience of being in this male body for me is, it is up to me to make it right for you. And type of thing. Like, I know that's not true, right? I'm not taking that seriously, but it's in me.
Yes. Yeah. I was just thinking about, codependence, independence, interdependence, right? Like this codependence is like, I gotta get this right. I've got to be good for someone. And independence, like, okay, fine, fuck it, I'm on my own, whatever. Interdependence, like, oh, there actually is a way that we can be for each other and with each other without losing ourselves or giving ourselves up. And I was just thinking, speaking of Tantra, one of the really concrete moments I had in a workshop was around touching to try to make someone feel good versus touching for my own pleasure.
Yeah.
And the huge fight I had with my partner at the time when I was trying to touch him in a way that I thought would feel good for him. And he was just like, this sucks. And this is like horrible. I mean, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh. And then when I went and I did the exercise to touch him for my own pleasure, it was amazing for him and it was amazing for me. And I think I relate to men a lot in that way. Like, somehow I feel like I have a lot of male energy, or there's this part of me that is trying to do and trying to make, I think women do this too. I think it doesn't matter, gender, but like trying to get it right and trying to accomplish and feeling really horrible if I'm not good at something. And so oftentimes I do work a lot with men because the interdependent place feels like, oh, I want to make something really beautiful and good and pleasurable happen for this other person. And I want it to feel pleasurable for me too, right? Yeah. It gets to be a both and or a win-win instead of I'm going to sacrifice myself or leave my body to just try to make something happen over there, right? You don't get to those states of ecstasy and union and wild, trippy happening intimacy and sex if you leave yourself.
Yeah, and it leaves out that word satisfied that you have in your title there. It's like, is that really satisfying? I mean, for some men, I'm going to guess that it is satisfying for a little bit to make you happy or feel good, right?
Yeah.
But at a certain point, I'm if I continue to leave myself out of the equation, right? In other words, if the feeling good on my side happens by making you feel good, that's
without also feeling good over
exactly
there.
Like, wait, I need to have my own independent experience of feeling good. That's in relationship to you, but it's really, I don't know, we're generating this together.
Yeah. I mean, this feels a little vulnerable to say, but I think one of the really amazing things that I appreciate about my partner is that he really loves making me feel good. And he's on the ride. Like he's got his own sensations in his own body, but he's also learned to be so attuned and connected to me that he feels my pleasure. Sometimes it seems like as much as I feel it, like he'll be like, yes, like right there. Can you feel that? And I'm like, oh, well, I almost didn't until you just pointed it out. Like he can feel.
That's
so
sweet. Yeah.
That is the potential too, that we can be so in tune and connected with each other that we can feel each other's pleasure. And that doesn't happen when we're in a place of trying or thinking it should look a certain way or performing, like you said.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of co-generating the pleasure in that way is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
It's a collaborative process to find that sweet spot.
Yes.
Yeah. And if I'm stuck in get it right, it's going to be hard to find.
Yeah. Right. Because notice as we try to get things right, it's not very pleasurable or relaxed in our bodies. It's more of that mental driven, stressful place. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. What other advice do you have, Shana, for, I guess, the male or female partner in whether it's heteronormative relationships or not? But
yeah, for anyone, I'm just thinking about the word confident too. Like my take on confidence is, again, it's not a performance. It's not I must know everything and that would make me confident.
Yeah, I've mastered this.
It's more of a trust in oneself that, you know what, like whatever comes my way, I can navigate this. And I can show up for it.
I like that.
And, it's okay. Of course, we're all going to shut down or we're going to get triggered or things like that. So I don't want to, again, make it this pressure, but the more and more that I can trust myself, like, okay, I will, I'll be in the grit or I'll be in the discomfort, or I'll just be in this with someone until we actually work it through.
Yeah.
So I like seeing confidence that way.
Thank you for that reframe.
As opposed to performing. Yeah.
Yeah. Performing over and over and getting good at something, and then I'm confident.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Knowing
to me,
oneself.
that's more of a false confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. And you could say, we could make the argument that if I am a beginner snowboarder and I apply myself long enough, I will eventually feel confident because I, mastered the skill or whatever. But I think in this context, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Right. Because then there's like an end goal of, I actually will get good at knowing what she wants or knowing what he wants or figuring this out. And we're all so, moment to moment changing and dynamic as human beings.
Yeah, completely. Yes. And so back to the confidence thing, there was one other piece I wanted to add there around knowing oneself. Oh, and sometimes it's knowing oneself enough to say, I need to take a break or I need to stop for a minute. Right.
Yeah.
Having the confidence to do that, and also that we're going to be okay if I do that.
Yeah. I see
that can be upsetting. Right.
Yeah. And when I'm working with men, especially, I see a lot of like, wait, I've got to make this keep going. 'Cause if we pause or if we stop, it's all going to fall apart. And that kind of fear mindset, as opposed to, what if we pause and slow down and, find our way back to each other or reconnect, or, I realized I wasn't feeling my own body. I was trying to do, that doesn't have to be a horrible thing that you recognize that. It can be like, okay. Can you put your hand on my heart, or can you put your hand on my body somewhere? Can we just actually slow down so I can come back to myself before we keep going? Right. I know that could probably be a whole nother conversation we have, because I just threw that in, and there's a whole whatever around that. But like to be willing to be vulnerable with our partners, I think is also, that's powerful.
Completely.
That's when intimacy becomes stronger, is when we are actually vulnerable with each other.
Yeah. And it comes back to, again, the attunement with oneself and the other person in being, I think, that's a very powerful place to be honest in your shame or your fear or whatever's coming up for you.
Yeah. And the last piece I think about confidence too is, whatever shame we're holding about our shame, or whatever way we're judging ourselves, then if our partner's like, doesn't react the way we want to, or is a little bit overlooks us or misunderstood, then I think we go deeper and deeper into that shame. Whereas again, when we go back to that place of, it's okay that I have shame. It's okay that I make mistakes. It's okay that I'm human. All these things are okay about me.
Yeah.
Then if someone, if our partner doesn't really hear or see or understand us in that moment, it can be like, hey, I need you. Right. Or I need you to understand this, or I really need to have this conversation, or can you come back to me? 'Cause it seems like you were judging me, or, right. There's a whole world that gets to happen, I think, when we feel right about ourselves. And for me, that's a lifelong journey. It's not like I feel completely right. I'm just there.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, just really appreciating the reminders here that really our vulnerability, if we might want to sum it up in that term, but is very empowering. And it's sort of the ongoing path. Can we come back to that, to what's true, what's vulnerable, and bring it out in the open?
Yeah. 'Cause otherwise it's exhausting, right? To try to muscle on or hold up some facade or be the perfect one or be the rock. That just doesn't end well. Yeah.
Again, I think a lot of men are going to be relaxing as they hear this.
Yeah.
So thanks for that. As we wind down, Shana, let me first ask you where folks can find your new book.
Yes. So on Amazon, if you type in Power and Pleasure, Shana James, I think that's probably the best place to find it in this moment.
Okay, awesome. So we'll make sure we put that in the show notes. And where can folks find you? ShanaJames.com, is that?
ShanaJamesCoaching.com.
Yep.
And I can't remember if I'd done my TED Talk the last time we talked or not, but if you go to ShanaJamesCoaching.com/TEDx, there's a talk called What 1,000 Men's Tears Reveal about the crisis between men and women.
Yeah.
So I think that's always a good one. And I think it's actually a great one for partners to watch together.
Mm-hmm. Huge. And then talk about it afterwards. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll put those links in the show notes. And then Shana's has an amazing podcast also that I've been on.
Yes.
So make sure
definitely
you
check out our episodes on Man Alive.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I loved having you on. We did some great episodes.
Yeah. Thanks. I always love jamming with you. Yeah. All right. 2 final questions. What else? What did we miss with limited time here? Any sort of parting words?
Parting words. I'm just going back to the word satisfied. And again, how satisfied and pleasure and power, like how sometimes I can have a sense of like, well, those are selfish. Those things are kind of selfish to want to be satisfied or to want to have pleasure. And so I just want to bring it back to collaborative, right? And that the more, maybe not the more, I don't want to do this judgment, but it's like, if I'm feeling empowered or if I'm experiencing pleasure and I'm in a relationship with someone else, likely it will kind of bleed off of me, right? Well, like it'll create an updraft or an uplift.
Completely.
And if we're both in that place of feeling dried out and feeling tired and feeling unsatisfied, it starts to take us down into that black hole.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, right? Like a good start for a couple could be to look at like, what's uplifting us about our relationship right now and what's draining us? You know, what feels, what are we appreciating about each other and what is feeling challenging, and that you can actually start to navigate and collaborate around that together.
Yeah. Thank you. Perfect. And final question is that I asked you before that I'm going to ask you again, because it's always interesting what people say the second time or third time. One of our missions here is to reach a lot of young people with relationship education. Yeah. I work through conflict, et cetera. And I'm curious if I had a room full of 1,000 teens and you were whispering in my ear, what would you want me to tell them if I could only tell them one thing about relationships or love?
That makes me cry. Because I just so wish that someone would have whispered in my ear when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And I think it goes back to that, feeling right about ourselves. Like, it's okay if you don't want to do something. It's okay if you do want to do something. You're not a slut. You're not a prude. You're not right? Like all these stories and ideas that we have about each other. Yeah. That they're not real. And that underneath that, we're all struggling to try to figure this out and feeling vulnerable and feeling confused. I think that's still happening as adults. Yeah. Yeah. And I just wish that we could all recognize that in each other. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. Beautiful. Yeah. Cool. Shana James, great hanging out with you again. Great to see you.
Good to see you too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Shana James, folks, make sure you go check her out. She's been on the podcast before. I believe that was episode 258. If you want to hear more from her and her style, her vibe. She also has a great podcast that I've been on a couple of times that is also really good. She has interviewed tons of men. Her podcast is called Man Alive. And I believe her website is Shana James. Yeah, Shana James Coaching. So go check her out. Okay, action step. I loved what she said at the very beginning. What do I like and what don't I like? Specifically around sex, okay? That's your action step. Have that conversation. First, get clear on yourself, and then share it with your partner or a friend. And why do we do this? Because it takes us out of isolation, like, oh, I'm learning about relationships by myself in my cave, into relationship with other people, and it allows us an opportunity to be vulnerable and real and have an authentic connection with someone, okay? Yeah. If you want to go deeper, you could listen to this episode with the person and then discuss. But I just love this question. What do I like and what don't I like? And can that be okay? Boom. Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. And of course, come hang out with us in our free community, relationshipschool.com/community. And come to one of our trainings, relationshipschool.com/training. Man, make sure you're following me on Instagram. Okay, I'm probably the most active there and on Facebook. So would love your comments on some of my posts. Great. Take care, folks. Talk soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Share one of these videos with a friend. We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.